Hi everyone, I'm so glad you're joining me today. I hope everybody had a really good Christmas and New Year's. I know that I sure did, but now I'm ready to get back into the swing of things. And for me, it always seems like when the month of January rolls around, after I take all my Christmas things down, I'm so ready to make something or change something in the house just to do something because you lose so much of that coziness through Christmas when we have all our lights up and the Christmas trees. When you take it down, you're like, oh my goodness, it feels so blah. So for me, the month of January, I kind of want to either I want to change a room around or do something. So I thought I'd share with you today something that I did do while I was taking my Christmas things down. I decided to convert one of my bedrooms into a craft room, sewing room, framing my samplers room. Just, I really needed this. I was doing all of my work down in our basement, and that was fine, except for in the winter, it doesn't get real cold down there, but I freeze anyway, so it was kind of cold. So I decided I was just going to have all my stuff in one room, but I didn't want to have a room that looked like a craft room. I wanted to make sure that it still flowed with the rest of my house. I still wanted to have some pretty primitive pieces in here. So I'll kind of share with you guys what I did and how I'm managing to hide my craft supplies and everything and still keep the look of a room that, looks like that we want it to look. So I'm going to share that with you today. And then I'm also going to share with you a simple, quick, little primitive bonnet that I make. This is a pattern that I made up myself. And for a lot of you that don't sew, it's not a very hard thing to make. And I understand if you don't sew, you may not be interested in this. But for those of you that do, I don't like to put all the time into making one of the prairie bonnets that, I don't know, I came up with a simpler way to make one. And the way I like to use them, I like to hang them on peg racks or the side of a chair. And this works perfect without putting all the extra effort into making it a really pretty bonnet. So it's something simple, and I think you'll enjoy it. It's not hard to make at all. So we're going to do that today. And then through the month of January, what I'm going to try to do is just share some things with you here around the house, some different things that I've made, or share with you simple ways that I do things, window treatments, just some things like that I'm going to be doing here around the house. So I hope you'll stick around with me. I know that after we get through Christmas and we've done all these home tours of all these beautiful homes, I thought we'd kind of give everybody a little break and let everybody get their houses back to normal. And then I'll pick back up with some of my home tours, probably starting in February, March. But anyway, guys, I hope you stick around for this, and I hope you enjoy it. And I hope this is simple enough for you that this is something that you'll try to do yourself. Thanks for joining me today. Now here's a new view of my craft room / office. I wanted to still have the look of a primitive room, but I also wanted cabinets with drawers and, just places where I could store all my craft supplies and books and patterns and that sort of thing. And I had this really big cabinet back here. I had that in my hall, and I thought that thing is so big inside and has so much storage. That'd be the perfect place for me to store all my crafts in different little baskets. And I'll show you guys the inside of that cabinet. And then here's my little desk. I bought this desk the other day we have these stores around here called Habitat for Humanity, and they get a lot of building supplies and different things like that. And, I thought a desk, to try to find something that's going to look old like I want to use, it's probably going to be impossible. So I said the dark wood on this, I can make it work. And that's where I can kind of do my editing of my videos and work on framing all the different sampler prints that I do. And then I just filled this wall here with a lot of the some of the prints that I've made and some samplers that I've stitched. And then I put a big table in here. This was a hutch table, know if you can tell, but the lid folds back and makes like a seat. They call it a hutch table. So I knew I wanted a big table in here that I could work from. I can set my sewing machine down here on this table. I can frame my samplers here, just, cut my patterns, whatever I need to do. So I kind of like this table because it still has the look I was trying to achieve, but, it's still big enough that I can work on it. So that's kind of just a little overview of my craft room. And let me kind of show you what it looks like inside these cabinets. Now again, this big old piece I had in my hall, kind of connected to my living room. And I decided I could probably use it for storage in here. And then I just kind of wanted to decorate the outside. I've got a cape and a powder horn. And you guys know me, I've got to have my wool hanging. But inside here, you can see that it's a creaky door because it's an antique. But let me move this lamp. You can see it made the perfect place to store all my craft supplies, my sewing supplies. I've got fabric down here rolled up in rolls on the bottom. And I still need to make me some little labels for my baskets so it'll be easier for me to find things. But got all my little dried pumpkin stems that I've dried. Flags, anything that I would probably use to make something with or decorate with. I'm trying to keep it in here. Got all my sampler fabric and just all my craft supplies. And then in this little cabinet, I just have all my little books. I have all these. I love these little books. They're from American Country. I bet a lot of you probably have this set. And there's like, I think I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 6 of them. And they're all different things about, they're probably books back from maybe like the late 80s or early 90s. And then I've got a lot of my cross stitch books, just old books. Used to love to read books about antique samplers and some pattern books. So that's where I'm keeping all of that. And then I had this piece in here, and all I had to do, I just moved it off of one wall and put it over here. And in this piece, I've got plenty of drawer space that I can put paints or, whatever I need to put in here. I feel like I've got plenty of storage in here to make this an efficient craft room for me. But I'm enjoying it. Maybe I miss being able to decorate, that third bedroom, but I think this will be more useful to me. I'll get a lot more use out of having a craft room in here. Okay, so now I'm going to show you that primitive bonnet that I was telling you about. It's one that I created the pattern for, just something very simple. And I'm going to use this little work table here, so I'm going to move this big green bottle. I wouldn't know how to do anything if I didn't have something that I had to move or take off or to cook or make something, because I have to decorate everything. All right, let me dig my pattern out of here. Now you can see this is the pattern I'm using. Just very simple. I'm just going to cut 2 of these. And I've just labeled it Easy Bonnet. This was just one that I drew out myself. And I'm going to pick out some fabric. Okay, so here's the pattern. Just a long, it looks like a big long piece of nothing the way I'm showing you. But it makes the cutest little bonnet that hangs so well on a peg rack. And here's the fabric that I chose. It's just a brown homespun. And homespun, you can see that it looks the same on both sides. So to me, I'd rather choose something like that, because when you hang it, when you hang something, you never know how it's going to fold back, or that way both sides look the same. Okay, so what we're going to do, this is real simple. Now look at me, I feel like I'm truly back in the 17 or 1800s. I'm sitting in this banister back chair, probably the most uncomfortable chair I could sit in. But they look so cute around my table, but I'm definitely going to have to find me something a little bit more comfortable to sit in. And this takes about a yard of fabric. I think it takes about a yard. I haven't made one in a while. Let me turn this way so y'all can see what I'm doing. Okay, so here's our pattern. Got my fabric all laid out. Here's the pattern. And we're going to need to cut 2 of these. And what you're going to need to do, just get you some craft paper, newspaper, and you need to cut a piece that's a rectangle, 30 inches long by 11 inches wide. So it's going to be 11 inches down here across the bottom and 30 inches from here to the top. So you've got your rectangle. And then all you need to do, this side just stays straight is fine. Just leave this side straight. And you can see, this is where the back of the bonnet will be, the back of the head. It just rounds off. All you need to do is just round that top part off and go in just a little bit about where the neck of this would be. And then this is going to be the tail. I hope that's making sense. You'll understand better when I start sewing it together. But, so just round this off at the top and go in a little bit where the neck would be. And then we're just going to cut 2 of these. Pin this right quick. And these are so simple that you can make several of them to hang on your peg racks, and they look so pretty when you've got a whole grouping of them hanging together. So let's put one more pin right here. These aren't exactly the sharpest scissors. And then I just cut the corner off of my rectangle and rounded it. Okay. Now, see, with my fabric folded, you know how when you have your fabric folded, there's my 2 pieces that I need. Okay, now we're going to need, let me see if I can find one that I've made. Now I can show you guys what I'm talking about. This is the finished bonnet, very simple, but hangs so well on a peg rack. And you can see we just have what I was describing to you, just to round off the back part of the rectangle and come in at the neck a little bit. But we're going to gather this neck up, and we're about to cut ourselves a little tie that will be sewed onto the top of the neck. So I'll show you how to do that. So here's what we have left of the yard of fabric after we don't even think it took a yard. It really only took 30 inches, and a yard is 36. So got plenty of fabric. Okay, now the simplest way to make the 2 straps that hang around the bonnet neck are going to be to cut 2 strips, and I'll just rip these, but I'm going to cut them about when I say cut 2 strips, I just make a little slit and then just rip it. Now I need to make a second one. I'm going to do the same thing. Okay, so now we've got our 2 ties. Okay, so now we've got our bonnet pieces. I'll take these pins out. Okay, now I'm going to dig out my sewing machine, and I'll show you guys how simple this is to make. Okay, here we go. We've got our 2 bonnet pieces. Got our 2 bonnet pieces, and we've got our 2 ties. And the first thing we're going to do is sew the front and the back bonnet pieces together at the back. So let me get these lined back up. And the good thing about using homespun fabric is that there's really no right and wrong side, so they're going to match no matter which side you use. Now, if you're using fabric that, you know, the back side doesn't look like the front side, you have a wrong side, then you're going to have to make sure that your right sides are together when you do this. And all we're going to do, make sure we got everything all lined up. Start up here at the top of the bonnet, the top, and then you've got your straight edge, and we're going to sew around to the back where the curved edge is. That will be the back of the head. That's the back of your bonnet. So we're just going to sew these two pieces together. Get my glasses on so I can even see what I'm doing. We're just going to work our way around this curve on the back side of the bonnet. And we're going to work our way in for the neck. And just finish out all the way down the tail part of the bonnet. Okay. Now, when we turn this with the right side out, push our seams out, you can see where the shape of the bonnet's coming in. You can see the round part for the head, and then where it goes in for the neck. Okay, so now what we need to do is hem these raw edges. The raw edges are going to be all the way around the outside of this bonnet, all the way around. So let's hem that raw edge. Okay, so that's got our raw edge folded in or seamed in. So now we're going to hem across the bottom because we don't want that raw edge across the bottom. Now I'm going to cut my loose strings off that are hanging from where I started my seam. See if I have any more. Okay. All right, so we've got our pretty much the base of our bonnet. Now, what we're going to need to do, we need to get some gathering right in here through the neck. Before we do that, we need to sew up our ties. Okay, and the simple way to do this, instead of having to sew them and then turn them right side out, I don't know where I learned this trick, but it was a simple little trick I learned somewhere, and it just makes it a whole lot easier. So the first thing we're going to do is sew the two ties together so that we have one long tie. I've got strings everywhere. And then after we do that, I'll get them apart. Now we have one big long tie. So now what we're going to do is fold this tie in half. Fold it in half. And then we're just going to sew right down the edge. So we're just going to have this tie folded in half, and then I'll show you what we do after that. Make sure when you're sewing and folding that in half that you get your wrong side. You know, you want to fold up your wrong side. That's got where you seamed it, the two together. That needs to be folded up so that seam is not showing on the outside. Y'all just remember, I am not a seamstress. I barely know how to sew and make curtains and capes and bonnets. And so a lot of you are probably like, oh, you're probably about to just die the way I'm doing some of my sewing, but it's just the easiest and fastest way I know how. And for the things I do, they're hanging for decoration only. It's not like we're going to be wearing this. So y'all bear with me. I'm really not the best sewer, but I wanted to at least show you how I do these simple bonnets. Okay, so there's our tie sewed in half. Now what we're going to do is we're going to take this raw edge here, we're going to fold it in, and then we're going to just sew it down. Just run you a seam along this edge over here and just fold that down. Then you're going to end up with a tie that looks like this, and that raw edge will be sewed down. Probably see too, I didn't last very long in that antique banister back chair. I had to come get me a kitchen chair that was more comfortable. Get my strings off here. And you can see now we have a long tie that looks like this, and this is our more strings. This is the back side of this tie where I've sewed down the raw edge. Okay, so our next step is going to be to put the gathering in this bonnet, and then we'll be attaching this tie around the bonnet all the way around, and then the tie will hang off the front. And in order to do that, it's very simple. It sounds hard, but it's not. Let me get the camera at a little better angle so y'all can see better. Okay, so what we're going to do, just need you some pins, just one pin for now. Actually, 2 pins. We've got our bonnet folded in half, and you can see the curve of the bonnet where it goes in for the neck and back down. What we're going to do, we're going to come down 10 inches. We're going to come down 10 inches from the top, and we're going to put a little pin to where that 10-inch mark is. And the reason I'm doing this, and we're going to do this on both sides. So I've got my 10 inches marked. You turn it over, and you don't even need to measure that. Just mark it in the same place. And what that's going to do, that's where we're going to start our gathering. And our gathering is going to go all the way across the bonnet. You're just going to run a seam of gathering, and whether you do that with your machine or by hand is your choice, from one side to the other. So you can see where my pins are, where I've marked the 10 inches. And we're just going to run a strip of gathering across there. So let's do that right quick. And the way that I do it, like I said, you can do it 2 ways. You can do it by hand and just run a hand-stitched loose seam all the way across here, and then pull the ends of your string and just adjust your, to get your gathering in. But I'm going to do it on my machine, and you just go and get the longest stitch on your machine, and then I'll pull the threads at the end. You don't want to secure when you start and stop. You don't want to reinforce that seam. Just start the seam, run all the way to the end, and end the seam, and leave a long enough thread where you can pull that and get your gathering in your bonnet. So I'm going to start with this loose seam where I've got my pin here. And you can see I've left a loose seam, loose threads that I can pull by. Now for mine, I've set it to 6 on the seam stitch length. So that's going to make a pretty big, you're only going to get 6. I guess that is like 6 seams per inch. So that's what we're going to go with. And I'm just going to work my way all the way across the bonnet. And I'm aiming for the pin on the other side so that I'll know that I'm keeping this straight. I'm leaving myself a long string. And let me move this camera so I can show you how I'm going to gather that. Okay, so I'm going to start here where I left the strings hanging. And I'm going to grab one of these strings and just start gently pulling the string if I can get a hold of it. And then just slide my fabric. So you don't want to pull that string too tight because you don't want it to break. You'll have to do it again if it breaks. And then what I'll do this first side till I get to the center seam and get my fullness in there. I'm just easing it along. Let's see, we're almost there. Okay, so I've got some gathering on this side. Now we're going to turn it over and we're going to gather this side. Grab my string again. I'm grabbing the top string and I'm just easily sliding this across. So we can get our, and one reason I like to do it on the machine, it seems like that it does it a little bit more even than if I try to do it by hand. And it's quicker. And then let's just look at these and see if we've got about the same amount on both sides. And if you don't, you can pull a little bit of that out. And I think we're good. And what we'll do with that tie is you want to lay this out flat. I'm not going to cut my string just yet until I make sure I'm done with my gathering. Get you some pins. And we're going to lay the wrong side because we've got the right side here up and we want this. This is how our bonnet's going to hang on the rack. So we want this side to be what's the right side to be out. Hope I'm making sense to y'all. I'm going to fold this tie in half. And the easiest way I found is to start in the center of your tie. See, I've got the center here in the tie. I'm going to put that center seam on the center seam of the bonnet, right over that gathering. And I'm going to put me a little pin there. Okay, so now I'm going to do is pin this right on the end. Do the same thing on this side. And then I'll put a couple more pins just because you just want that tie to be sewed on top of that gathering. Okay, we've got the tie pinned on here. It's all pinned in place all the way across. Now all we've got to do, I'm going to run a stitch across the top of the tie, and then I'm going to go back and run a second stitch at the bottom of the tie. That way it doesn't roll up. We want it to be laying flat on our bonnet. So now let's just sew that up. Just going to sew the top part of the tie first. Okay, that's the first side. You can see where I've got the top of it sewed down. I'm just going to come back and do the same thing and sew the bottom part of the tie. Okay, so now we've got our bonnet. It's all finished, and the last step is something that you can do or not do. It's totally your choice. So we've got our bonnet now. It's going to be so cute hanging on our peg rack. Now what I like to do, where we started and ended our gathering on the ties, I just like to put a decorative, just a little button here, just an old button on each end. And I have my grandmother's, this is my Granny Hinkle's little sewing box, and it's full of all of her little old buttons or some of the buttons that she had. So I'm going to go through here and pick out a couple of buttons, and I'll just show you what I do with them. See if we can pick out two brown buttons that match. There's something about vintage buttons, I just love them. Okay, I found two little buttons that match. Hope y'all can see those or not. And all I'm going to do, well, first I'm going to cut these strings off here. I didn't cut my strings off after I sewed it. I'm just going to sew a button right to where the end of our gathering and where our tie ends or starts. Okay. Okay, so now I'm just going to sew this button on. Okay, so we've got our little button on here and more little loose threads. Now let's sew the other button on the other side. Okay, so here's our finished bonnet. Just very simple. Let's make sure we've got our little seams pushed back to make the rounded part. And now we'll go hang it on our peg rack and see what it looks like. And the good thing about these is once you get the hang of it, I mean, I can make one of these in probably maybe 30 minutes. It doesn't take long once you get going. So you can fill a peg rack up with these little bonnets pretty quick. They're very simple. So let's go see what it looks like. Okay, now I'm going to show you what these look like if you were to hang them on a peg rack. Now this is a peg rack that I already had fixed up. I've already got lots of stuff hanging on it. But I'm going to take a few things off and just trade out for these bonnets and see how we like this. Let's see. Okay. This is the one we made today. Let's hang it right there. And then this is the one that I showed you that I'd already had that I made. And let's hang it right there. Now this one, I wanted to show you guys this. This one is made the exact same way. I just didn't make the bottom part as long. So you can cut that off. Instead of making this 30 inches from the top to bottom, cut this bottom off to whatever you want it to be. You can make them short to where they'll resemble this kind of bonnet. Now this is not the same pattern, but it's short. So you could cut this off even say to here if you wanted to. But I like the short ones. I think the short ones are still look good too. And so you can use any fabric, any length that you want. So I think they look good hanging there. We could still add back in our things that we had. But yeah, I think they're perfect for a peg rack. Yeah, so and if you wanted to add a more aged look, you could tea dye these or age them however you age things. You could do that to them as well. I didn't do either one of these. I was happy with the way the fabric looks, but you could always do that if you wanted to. But I had actually had a peg rack in my kitchen that I made a lot of bonnets in a green type fabric, a print, and just because I had some kind of teal green pieces in my kitchen, and I thought that looked real pretty. I did that one time. But anyway, guys, I hope you got something from this video today. And I hope if you're, I know it's not for everyone. I know not everybody sews, but if you do sew, I hope you'll try your hand at making one of these simple bonnets. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me. I'll try to answer them. And just thank you for joining me today. And I'll just see you guys in the next one.